Hello, I'm Renee Baribeau, and welcome to the Shamans Cave. We thought today we're going to do the Q&A, which we've been promising, and we've picked out some of the questions you've asked us, and we thought we would get a little wind for this. So let's call on a wind spirit today and see who comes to play with us. Oh, this is interesting. So we got Ehuta Emasay, the Creek Wind of Protection. So we can move forward with confidence today. So you know, we're in good guys. So whatever we answer, you know, the winds have our back on this one, Sandra. So if you disagree, please go to the Shaman's Cave wall and let us know. But this is for us. And Sandra, introduce yourself and then I'll blow the wind.
Okay. I'm Sandra Ingerman, and we're happy to be able to have this session on Q&A. And we have many questions, but for this show, we're just going to start with a few, and we'll have more Q&A shows in the future. But for now, let's let Renee call in the wind.
So just a little bit about the Creek Wind is this is part of their creation story that there was a major flood, and this might influence how we answer our question. There was a major flood, and then as the land came dried out, that people emerged from the earth, and you know, this is how creation was formed. And so, but they were protected in this. So today you're protected. So we're going to put a big protection bubble around our Q&A, and let's go from there. We're going to tread lightly with these questions.
Thank you, Renee. Well, as I said, we got a bunch of questions, and we're always open for more. Please feel free to send your questions in to the Shaman's Cave. But we decided to just pick a few, obviously, because our show is short. And again, we'll come back to other questions later. So here's a question from one of our viewers or listeners. I am curious about direct revelation in terms of group or cultural consciousness. Is it like spokes on a central wheel leading to the same center? Where do you see shamanic practice heading for future generations? I have the sense that I can journey on this, but would like to hear you both voice the idea into the world. I also wonder about wind and water working together, or wind and fire, the elements as a unit. I love the show. It is a wonderful space you create. With gratitude.
Well, thank you to the listener who sent that in. That's a multi-part question. Should we take it in sections, or do you want to start on the whole thing?
Oh, I think we should take it in sections about where shamanism is going. And, you know, one of the beauties of shamanism, I'll start with this one because I love to talk about this. One of the beauties of shamanism is that the practice, as far as we know, dates back over 100,000 years. And it might date back a lot farther as new evidence is coming up about the age of humankind and tools and different drawings and sketching on walls that have been found. And so, you know, to think about a practice that's still on the planet, that's still being practiced for over 100,000 years, it says a lot. And I think what it says is that shamanism works. And so, you know, it's still a viable practice. And Shamans, if they couldn't find food for the people in their tribe, or if they couldn't heal the people, they died. And so shamanism wasn't this fun new age practice of, you know, coming together and sharing about, you know, the power animal you found in a journey. Shamanism has always been about how to help people survive. And so it's always been a very result-oriented practice. And so in that light, it's had to change through different evolutions of the planet, different changes in climate, different changes of what people were going through. And so I've had groups journey endlessly on the future of shamanism. And basically the answer that most people have gotten is that when we get to the future, we'll see how the practice evolves, because the practice is always evolving. Even some of the indigenous people are changing their chants and their ceremonies to make them more applicable to what's going on today. And so there's no dishonoring of ancient practices in the evolution of shamanism, because nobody's practicing shamanism like it was originally practiced.
Well, I'd have to say ditto on all of that. And, you know, I've been telling you that this whole science fiction kind of movie story has been coming down. And so I've gotten this little glimpse into, you know, the future of this. And I do believe that shamanism is enduring. And what I'm sensing is that as I look at these new beings, because I do tend to work with a lot of 30-year-olds who are in the childbearing ages. One client came to me and we were doing a little bit of a reading. I don't do too much when people are pregnant. That's just my rule. And when, you know, she wanted to know whether the sex or whatever, but we didn't really go there. But what I did get from this child was, you don't even have the information that I need to live my life. You don't have anything I need. And I was like, well, thank you very much. You know, so as Sandra says, it's evolving, but it's been constant. And even I go back a lot to when we broke into religious factions and we tried to take away the shamans' ideas by putting them into the churches, you know, with the incense and all. They took the rituals and tried to transfer them into another format. And yet the shamans would still show up in the churches with their medicine pouches. You know, they thought more, not less, more. This is great. And so what I would love to see as we go forward is more spirit, more awe, more wonder, and, you know, let the shaman practices bloom where they will.
Yeah, and one of the journeys that I have in my Medicine for the Earth workshop is where we journey to descendants of the planet to look at how sound and light is used for healing. And I've done this journey all over the world, and it's amazing how everybody all over the world sees the same information about simple life, very earth-based. People actually going back to the creation story of the wind card, a lot of people get that people will be living in the earth and will be emerging at different times. And it's important to understand that shamanism, although it's morphed and changed so much, it's always been a nature-based practice. And that's a little bit of the piece that's missing today, because the technological world that we're living in removes us from nature, but nature is the magic, and nature holds the answers of how do we survive and what is it that we need. And so I think it's pretty obvious that in the future we'll be moving back to shamanism as a nature-based practice and not having it being so much of a technological practice as it's turning into right now.
And believe me, we love the technology because we can get to thousands of you every week with our technology. I was just speaking at the addiction conference, and I gave them, I told them three different ways, like the incidental way, the direct revelation way, which we'll get to that question next, and how that they can start to implement having pictures of nature in their office, like simple things that we can do to start to reconnect us, because we are nature. There's no separation between us and nature. So if the world around us dies, when the wind stops blowing, the scum over the pond takes our life, all of it is all connected. And the understanding of the shamans was through that right relationship with that connection, they could heal their communities, they could feed their people, they could be sustainable for many generations, which is the crux of right where we're at right now. Is we cannot be sustainable for many more generations if we do not get back to nature.
That's brilliant, Renee. Thank you. That's really brilliant. I love how you shared that. And so our same viewer had asked about the elements and how they work together. And for me, the answer of that is really simple, is that, again, in our culture, and I do this all the time, you read my books, you take a workshop, you listen to me lecture, I talk about Earth being the first, how old the Earth is, and wind and air, and I talk about water and fire and the sun. But it's just like Renee said, that we are nature. We're not disconnected from nature. Actually, earth, air, water, and fire are one living being. Just like we're made up of earth, air, water, and fire. But we don't talk about that, but we are. We're earth, air, water, and fire, and it's all one. You really can't separate them. But the way the human mind tracks and the way the human mind works is, let's put everything in a box, separate it out, define it, figure out how it works. But when you look at that alchemical process of that earth, air, water, and fire are all one, it brings through a whole different perception on the power that nature holds, and especially when we see it's one dance and not four separate dances.
And absolutely, I think separation is a man-made concept that happened many years ago when we became sedentary and stopped in one spot. We built houses, and then we thought we could control nature. We could bring fire outside in. We could open and close our windows to let the air in and out. And so we had some idea that there was some illusionary form of control that we could exercise over nature, that we elevated ourselves from nature. And then, now we get a hurricane and we see, hey, we really can't we really don't have that power. 50,000 homes are wiped out because it's an illusion. So the only answer, again, I'm going to go back to that, is to reharmonize, rebalance, and reorganize ourselves, that there is no separation, that we're 90%, 80 to 90% water, that fire is that kundalini energy that flows through us. You come into this world when you take that first wind breath in, you leave the world, you take that last wind breath out. And all of the dirt covered, and there's the physical, you're dirt covered.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you think about the alchemy of it, it makes a lot of sense. And earth, air, water, and fire, as they're not separate, they're always in relationship together, a strong relationship together. And shamans have known, and we actually talked about this on another show because it's kind of a controversial topic. Shamans have worked in relationship with the elements to have balance in the weather systems in their local communities. But the shamans had built such a strong relationship. The elements were their greatest friends. They talked to them every day, like Renee and I are talking on the show. You know, shamans were not strangers to the relationship with the elements, the beauty of the elements, the destructive forces of the elements. And through that building of relationship, how they had to negotiate with the elements to stay in balance for the community. And in today's world, we want to harness the power of the elements, and we like to dominate everything. And the key is not what element does what and how we can harness them. It's how do you build up a strong enough relationship with them so that they're your family. And as a family member, the positive of a family and the negative of family, of how we have to sometimes negotiate and how we have to work together and how we're not always in final control. But the elements themselves, they're always working together and inviting us to step into their field of energy.
Absolutely. Enough said on that one. Let's go to the direct revelation.
Yeah,
that's your favorite topic anyway.
They're all my favorite. I only that are my favorite topic.
I know we're not answering anything we don't like.
Yeah, so there was a question on, well, there was a couple of questions on direct revelation. So I'll go with the one that I think needs to be answered next. Many of you are starting out on your shamanic journey practice, which is the practice of direct revelation. That's what shamanic journeying is. And one definition of a shaman, there are many, you know, we limit the definition of what a shaman was, because shamans were many things that in the West we limit the understanding of shamanism. But one definition of shamanism is a man or a woman who travels with their soul into the unseen realms to meet up with helping and compassionate spirits who have a particular perception on human beings on this earth, because number one, they had life at one time and now they're transcendent, but they still have that memory of what living beings experience on earth. And because they're spirits, they're sitting in an arena where they could look down on our lives, where we're so busy playing the game of life, we can't see around us and they can. And so that's called the practice of direct revelation, is being able to travel into the unseen realms and meet up with these helping and compassionate spirits. And many people, when they start journeying, get stuck. And so our listener was asking, because they are stuck and wanting some direction on what are they doing wrong or how can they improve their journey skills. And so, Renee, do you want to start?
Oh, let me tell you, when I first went to shaman school, because I did, and I would sit there and these people would come back with these incredible, you know, fancy-filled journeys, and I'd be sitting there like, I didn't get anything, you know, and I didn't get anything, and then I didn't get anything, and so it took me a really long time to know that I got what I got, and what I first got was, and a lot of times is I just know things, so I would get a knowing, but but I would discount that because they would tell these, really fanciful stories that I wasn't having. And, and I used to go to this woman for soul retrievals early on, and she would tell you a story that was worth paying for. And then here I am and like getting like 2 or 3 words. And it was only through the process of actually starting to journey for other people. And sometimes if you're stuck, this is what I would recommend is go journey for somebody else, because we're kind of codependent humans are, or pro-dependent, or however how you want to call it. And so when you're doing it for somebody else, you're going to do it right. You're going to want to do it better. And so you're going to have to trust what you get. And so some of those earlier journeys, I was like, I'd see things like I saw this man in a cage with a tiger, and I was like kind of embarrassed because I didn't want to tell him I saw this. And sure enough, I didn't know this, but he had been in a cage. He had to put a tiger to sleep one time, not out for good, but but I was afraid to even start to talk about what I saw. So I don't know how much of this direct revelation was being blocked by my own wanting to control and have it be something that it really wasn't for me.
Yeah, I think in my beginning workshops, I have people journey for another person for the exact same reason you're suggesting, Renee, is that when we're journeying for ourselves, oftentimes we can't get out of the way because we're so lost in where we are. We can't see around us. Somebody else needs to contact the spirits for us. And when you're journeying on another person, you're not so attached to the outcome. Yes, you want to have a good journey, but you have a particular detachment that what I found is for most people who are struggling, the doors into the non-ordinary realms just come bursting open. And like you, Renee, I'm not a visual person. And I'm visual in this reality, but not in non-ordinary reality. And I always share that the hardest population for me to teach shamanism to are artists, because I rarely find that artists see in their journeys, but they're used to being visual. And so the big mistake in our culture, there's 2 that I'll just share briefly, is number 1, people look at the ethnographic literature and keep seeing the word shaman seeing. And shamans see from their heart, they see from their soul. It has nothing to do with their eyes. And not all of us are visual in shamanic journey work. And what I found, I've done my own private research study on this, is whatever sense is the strongest for you in this reality is the weakest sense for you in journeying. So for me, I don't learn through auditory learning. I'm a visual learner, but in my journeys, I only get auditory and information in my body. I don't see. And also, we have to learn how to develop our inner senses so that we do see, hear, feel, taste, and smell in our journeys like shamans did. And shamanism is not an out-of-body experience. The shaman actually takes their body into the non-ordinary realms and sees, hears, feels, tastes, and smells. And they don't lie down when they journey. They dance, they sing, they drum for themselves, they rattle. It's a very movement, very active. And so the 2 biggest mistakes that I see people making in the West is trying to see their journeys as if they're watching TV or a movie. And being passive, lying down, and going to sleep, basically is what happens. but you start to, I drum for myself. I can't listen to other people drumming. I drum for myself, for my journeys. Some people sing their journeys. God, we have thousands of people dancing their journeys like shamans did all over the world. And that's how you break through those stuck places, being more active and opening up your invisible senses.
You know, and that's one of the things that I think is so valuable about this wind whistle tool is that it brings me present. You know, the actual work of exhaling 3 times gets me in the present moment. And I often, like if I blow a wind whistle for a client, will get visions right away for them, or see what the land's doing around them, or and stuff. And it's just for me, because someone was saying that, oh, your journeys are too short. Well, both Sandra and I were like this, so you have to. I think the more practice, it doesn't take quite so long, although there's some nice things in a long journey, but I get the information that I need and I come back here to put it into practical use. You know, there's that thing of transcending and living in that journey world too long when you have to put it into practical use, because your community is what you're trying to feed, your longevity. It's like when we have a soul's purpose with it, it has more validity. So a lot of times if we're just journeying, just to see if we can have a vision, but when there's an intent and a purpose to it, I think you always get the information you need.
Absolutely. And this is a big topic and we need to move on.
Okay.
But no, we don't have to move on if you want to stick with it.
We could move on. We'll do a show on this though.
Yeah, but I was just going to say that I have never met a person who couldn't journey, who didn't keep trying. I've met people who it took a year or more, and those people, there are people who say to me, well, I tried 5 journeys and it didn't work, and it's time for me to find another path. But there are people who it took over a year before they had to open up their invisible senses so that they could experience their helping spirits and having confidence to chant and dance and drum. And so it's all about a practice. This is a practice. And if you stick with it and keep experimenting, and again, Renee and I could do more of a show on this, and teach some shamanic journeying. But if you do stick with it and start to look at your unique senses, what you're the strongest in to start with, and experiment with different forms of movement and journeying to bring yourself present, you will find that opening into the non-ordinary realms.
Absolutely. And, in for those who are just stuck with it, also, sometimes guided journeys are very helpful because they create your imagination to go to places, and then you don't know whether it's your imagination or the journey, but just trust it.
Yeah, and for those of you who are interested, I did a CD. I created a CD with Sounds True. It's called Shamanic Meditations. And the hard copy is no longer available, but you can get the digital copy of it. And it's journeys to a power animal, to a teacher in the upper world for healing, and a journey to the earth for healing. And it's all guided by me. So if you want to check out that digital CD, it's a way to start you off on your process too.
And we'll put the link in this week's description on the Shamans TV page. So go to shamanstv.com and either we'll put it in words with some resources or under the link. So I'll just look for it.
Yeah. So let's see. I think this question kind of goes with the first question that we answered, and I think it's a good one just to say something about how can we as modern shamanic practitioners, not in a native culture, honor the ancient shamans of our ancestral past? I think that's an important question, in that there were so many shamanic cultures around the world, and we have to be careful about putting them all in one box, because they all had their own unique ways of working. I keep sharing with people, there are no two shamans anywhere in the world who work in the same way, except in the West. We've become a factory of shamans, and how we all work in the same way. And so it's important for us to understand that, yes, shamanism has a real history, and we want to honor the ancestors who made these practices available for us to work with our own helping spirits, to now make them applicable to the time we live in and to the culture we live in. And so it's a both and, where we don't want to stay tied to a particular shamanic culture, because this is the year 2019. And in the West, we're dealing with different issues than shamans had to deal with in traditional cultures. But in our hearts, we always want to give thanks, and we want to perform gratitude ceremonies for all the ancient cultures that kept the practice of shamanism alive, despite persecution, being killed, being imprisoned for their practices. We want to at least honor and give thanks for their lives and what they graced us with.
Absolutely beautiful. And I would go back to something that the wind told me, is that, these ancient wisdom practices were on the wind long before we heard them. And so it's like the titles of books, there's no copyright on it. And so don't get so locked up in that I've got to do this way or this particular step, because once the wind starts to inform me of new ceremonies and new rituals, it's not to say that they didn't show up at other places in time and that I haven't then gone and done research. Like in my book, Winds of Spirit, I boldly, because I really was concerned, I stepped into 32 different cultures and found winds from all of these different cultures. And I tried to be as respectful and as full of honor as I could. And I did my research. I read countless articles, books, dissertations, and all this stuff, so that, and I'm learning more even still, so that as I stepped into these cultures as a novice, I could invite the wisdom to come through in a way that would be useful for us today, without consciously stepping on toes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that you said that really well, Renee. And it's just really important for us to embrace that every one of us has ancestors who practice shamanism, and to be grateful that this practice is still alive today for us to use, because tens of thousands of people have been healed through the practice of shamanism, and tens of thousands of practitioners are looking at how we can care for the earth in a better way. And so we're blessed with having shamanism in our life right now. So we want to give thanks to the ancient ones who have just had the courage, no matter what, to keep finding ways to carry the fire from one generation to the next, even if it wasn't a biological connection. It was a connection for the future descendants. And that's a very important topic in shamanism that's talked about a lot, is what do we have to do now to protect the seventh generation, the next seventh generation. And so in shamanic cultures, the descendants of the planet, not just the descendants of their biological family, but the descendants of the planet were embraced too, with the hope that the fire would be carried forward of the magic of shamanism.
And I believe that it is. And I was talking to somebody last night about a beautiful story about what a 7-year-old saw, and the 12-year-old who came to see me, whose eyes opened as wide when I said, yeah, no, I think flying is a possibility. And these children have within them all of the seeds. And if you want to know what your seeds are, one of the things that my Swami used to tell us was to journey back through your womb, to go back through your womb chakra and go back through to the first mothers and find out what those first mothers were teaching. And, men have womb chakras too, so you can do that as well. Just go back, and find out where you could connect your own roots to, because truthfully, we all ascended from a very few mothers.
That's true. That's a good point. Renee, somebody had a question about destiny retrievals, and you said, do you know about destiny retrievals?
So we have some followers who have studied in a lot of different shamanic programs, and I don't talk about it much, but I went through the Four Winds 2-year program, and one of their modules is about destiny retrieval. And the idea behind a destiny retrieval is that you have, think of your life as a tree that has multiple branches coming out, and that in a destiny, and the way I see it is that, you have a soul's purpose, but there's many different tree branches you can take to get to that soul's purpose, and whether or not you fulfill your soul's destiny in this incarnation or not. However, that if you go out to the future, and you probably have another word for this, if you go out to future strands, you can pull back a different line. So, for example, when I was in my 20s or 30s, I was told, my 20s, I think, I was told that I might have a major illness in my 40s. Okay? At that point, had I kept down the drinking and the drugging route, that might have come to fruition, but I took a different path up the tree. And so that's when I had that spontaneous healing right at 40, when I was sitting in a lecture with, it happened to be Hank Wesselman, when I had this dismemberment. He was lecturing at the front of the class, and all of a sudden I was totally dismembered. I mean, my friends had to carry me from the room, and he was up there still lecturing about long distance healing of all things. But I had a long distance healing that was not what he was talking about at the front of the room. And so in that journey, there was a black mass taken out from my womb area, and it was discarded. And so in my world view of a destiny retrieval, I took a different path, had a different destiny, and called in a different destiny, where whatever that illness was that this psychic saw in my 20s, I didn't call in because I had changed the path. Which takes me to, I do soul card readings for people. That's, one of the things that I do with my coaching clients. And I'm always very careful about anyone that I let into my world. And I know, Sandra, we're the same on this, is that if you go to a street psychic and they're got, colored blinders on, they could pull in a destiny for you that you're not heading towards. You always have the right to say, no, that doesn't resonate with me. That's not for me. And you can change it from that moment. You don't have to set the momentum going in that direction. And so I'm very, very careful about what I set in stone for somebody's future. And as shamanic practitioners, I would I would caution you to be very, very careful when you see something that might be coming up for somebody to put it into form.
Mm. Yeah, and that's another big topic we can talk about later, another show. I, as you're talking about that, I teach a process that's a little bit similar but different, in that there's different levels to the destiny retrieval. I was working on a client back in the 1980s doing a soul retrieval, and my power animal, who I work with, showed me this man's original soul purpose. And I said to my power animal, well, how did he lose it? Because I was doing a soul retrieval for him. And he said he never lost it, he forgot it. And he said, I'm going to show you how to do a soul remembering. So that was the word that came from my power animal. And as I started doing soul rememberings for years to come, and I teach it in my soul retrieval trainings because it's a fabulous practice to do with people. And how I explain it to people is that before we came into this world, we're out there, as this little being of light, and we're looking down at planet Earth and how beautiful it is. And you're just this little spark of light. And what are the gifts and the talents and the strengths that in this incarnation you have come to manifest? What does that look like? What would that feel like? And then what happens to us is as soon as we're born, our parents start to project onto us the definition of what our soul's purpose is. Our teachers do, authority figures do, and all of a sudden, like a sculpture, we have all this clay. We've been formed. Our definition of who we are has been formed by others. And I always, one of the examples I use was a client of mine who was a doctor. And he told me he never wanted to be a doctor, but his mother would, when he was in the womb, she would just rock back and forth in a rocking chair, saying, you're going to be a great doctor one day. You're going to be a great doctor one day. And so we all came here for a specific desire of what we want to experience this time around. And then we get here and others tell us what we're good at and what we should do and what we look like. And, the list goes on. And so I like to do the practice of soul remembering, of either having a client do this for themselves, or I teach soul retrieval practitioners how to do this for a client, of going back before you were born, before there was any projection, because the nature of human beings is to project, and look at what was your excitement about being born on this earth before anybody had a chance to come in and tell you something different. So there are similar practices, but I like in the destiny retrieval how you more explore the path, where I just get what did you come here to be? So they're different practices, but with certain similarities to them too.
Well, we'll have to put some of those exercises into future Shamans TV episodes, because I simplified it, but you go up a few different layers and there's different things going on all the other layers. And I think I talked about in the past stopping at the Baribeau layer and visiting, my dad. So that I don't remember which episode that was, but maybe we'll go back to there. Well, we're out of time for our Q&A, so we're going to have to do this fun, because this is kind of fun and spontaneous, and we don't know where we're going to go with this.
Exactly, and it's nice to have you to bounce with, Renee, because we've studied with different peoples, different traditions. we have very different lives and we work with very different populations. And so thank you for the brilliant work that you're doing.
Oh, and you, I think this is a mutual admiration society here. It's like, you know, we have fun every week and we just invite you in to listen. So lucky for us all that we're here.
And thank you everyone for bringing your heart into our shows. And remember to always check out Shamans TV for our schedule. And we now have an amazing amount of archive shows that you can listen to with an amazing wealth of information.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you, Renee.